we tend to, as founders, as revenue leaders, we tend to have like a really, really good ideas. We're looking for organizations that are looking to build a sound culture from the start, from the revenue organization, leading with empathy, but also transparency and collaboration. And with all of those things, the revenue piece will come. It'd be really cool if we could hire like a Geoffrey from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, like a butler, to get
all right. Thanks for listening in to the What Worked podcast. A little bit of background, because this is our first episode. Tyler and I wanted to start the What Worked podcast to take people behind the curtain of the successes that we see with companies and people with their careers, and really dial in on what actually worked. Oftentimes we hear these success stories, we see the TechCrunch articles, we see the promotion announcements on LinkedIn, but Tyler and I are always curious to know what worked for you, what worked for different companies. So we're really excited to bring on some awesome guests to talk about what worked.
Yeah, and I'll just I'll echo that, in that what we're really trying to recreate is I think it's that coffee shop conversation that you have with someone, right? So someone that you might know, or someone that you get introduced to. You go and you meet up for coffee, and then you catch each other up on what's going on, what you're working on, all that sort of stuff. But then really, like, what's the most compelling and great parts of those conversations that you take away? It's hey man, what's going on? What worked? I noticed that you did XYZ, and you really get to that like the truth, I guess. So this is like supposed to be a little less kind of like that like surface level thing that we all do on LinkedIn, and a little bit deeper than that. So let's like really get into that. Speaking of which, so our guest today, Marcus. Marcus is someone that, it's funny, I feel like Marcus, we've now known each other for lifetimes, which is so weird. We only met, pretty recently this year. I'd say like maybe a couple months ago. Got introduced through someone that I had met through networking, Nathan, who's a part of your firm. Yeah, Marcus Knight. I was from minute one extremely impressed with Marcus. Also felt like we were going to be fast friends, which is totally proven true. And when Mike and I were talking about, who would be a great guest for episode 1 of What Worked, Marcus, you were a no-brainer. Just given everything that you've accomplished, some of the really, really cool spots that you've been along the way, and honestly, just your your perspective, I think on business and life, that I'm really, really excited to jump right in. So I guess we're going to go deep, like I said, coffee shop chat deep into what worked in your career and in different companies in your current company. So we'll get into your kind of whole history, Marcus. But I think just for starters, why don't we just start off with, like who you are, if you can give a quick intro, where you're based. That's always fun, right? We can play that game. And also like what you're doing now. We're going to get more into your previous stops before your current business. So what you're doing now, and then I'm going to hit you with the vague but always cool to ask, what is a fun fact about Marcus Knight? I want to ask that one. So Marcus, on that note, why don't you take it away?
Tyler, Mike, appreciate you both. This is so awesome. I mean, I think that this is going to be a lot of fun. So Marcus Knight, he, him pronouns. I reside in Seattle, Washington. I'm from Chicago originally. And I am founder of a company called Culture Perspective, which is a go-to-market consultancy helping founders and revenue leaders put together the strategies to repeat and scale their growth. Let's see. So I've been in software sales for about 17 years, and there's a lot of trials and tribulations to get to where I am today. But what you consider me now is just someone that is like a revenue leader that can come up with like seeing around the corner and understanding like what's going to happen and how to put in the right processes so that we can grow this company, whatever it is that we're working on, products, company, etc. Let's see. I'm father of one, little son named Langston, who's 7, married to beautiful wife, Mia. And let's see, we love all things outdoors.
Well, that definitely covered it. And I will say that what's knowing a little bit about you and your business, I will say that what worked is very appropriate because I feel like you spend a lot of time working with founders of these early stage, venture backed startups, and I feel like a lot of what you're doing, you tell me if I'm wrong here, is kind of telling them, hey, this is what worked at these various, spots that I was at, and also more importantly, I feel like you're giving them a heads up. You said seeing around the corner. You're telling them
it'd be
what
really cool if
doesn't
we could
work,
hire like
and
a
I imagine
Geoffrey
you
from
see
Fresh
the
Prince of
what
Bel-Air.
doesn't work pretty commonly.
That is
to get
very
all of
true.
our
I mean,
stuff.
I think that we tend to, as founders, as revenue leaders, we tend to have like a really good ideas, but lack part of that execution piece just based off of ignorance or haven't doing it before. So when you're able to just say, hey, out of all of the companies that I've been a part of or that I've consulted, these are some of the trends that we've seen that has, either worked or hasn't worked. And so not to say that you're going to try everything perfectly the first time, but just be aware that we are going to fail, but we're going to fail quickly, and then we're going to pick ourselves back up and iterate very quickly. And being able to do that is something that I think is very important because you learn so much along the way from your failures. And again, like I've, all the things that I've done now, I've probably failed 3 times as many, as much as I've been successful.
Totally.
What didn't work? What didn't work?
What didn't work? Yeah. And I would say that's actually a fantastic, I think, transition. Let's take it back a little bit. When I think of a company that has lived the full life cycle of a tech company in terms of figured out some things that what works, also did a lot of stuff that didn't work, Groupon. I feel like Groupon. You tell me if you kind of agree with this. I think Groupon is equally, I guess, famous as it is infamous. I feel like it's infamous amongst the tech scene. So, Mike, I know Mike was doing a little bit of research on Groupon, prior to this, but Mike, I don't know if you had a specific question. Lots that we want to know about the Groupon experience for you.
When I was preparing and kind of reintroducing myself to Groupon, I had to take a step back, and I took myself back to early 2010s. Like I think the company was founded in like 2008 and they went public in 2011. And so I'm going to assume that a lot of people have heard of Groupon, but not a lot of people have actually been customers or like actually know what Groupon's all about. So, 2000, Marcus, I think you were there at 2012 ish. So like right around the time they IPO'd. So, I don't know what helps you guys let's take Marcus back to that time. Like where I always think about like what company I was working at.
Yeah.
Like the relationships that were close to me at the time, the music that I was listening to. 12.
Yeah. And I'll follow up that too. What Groupon deal did you actually personally buy? Because I think that's a very telling question. I have my favorite Groupon deal of all time, but I'll be so curious to hear.
Let's go around. Let's go around.
Well, I think the one that stood out the most, I had several just quirky and weird purchases because I'm like, oh, it's just a Groupon. Like, why not? But the one that stood out to me the most was like, I think it was a whitewater rafting one that I did.
Yeah.
And it was, I was like, living in Chicago at the time, was like, I don't know if I'll actually do this or not, but like, I'll buy it for a group of our friends and we'll see if we can do that. And it ended up being a lot of fun. And also just very dangerous at the same time. Like we just weren't listening to what we were supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
But it was great just to like get people out of their comfort zones a bit and try something new. Like that was the one that I think that was like, I remember it clear as day because my roommates at the time were like, why are we doing this? Like we could be at home just chilling, watching football.
Absolutely. Yeah, whitewater rafting, I completely agree with you. When I did it, I was like shocked that the amount of training they give you, it's like a 10-minute chat. And then they're like, all right, everybody get in this boat and we're all just going to, honor system here that we've all said that we can in fact swim. It's crazy. Mike, I feel like we'll have something funny.
No, it's the same things. I think like we're actually explaining a little bit about what Groupon is for people who might not know, but it's essentially like experience discovery. I think they're trying to introduce us to different experiences. And then on the company side, corporate side, like trying to help them offload like unused inventory, I guess, underutilized inventory. And just to take us back to that time, 2012, like this is like Instagram had just came on the scene, I think.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of like at least for me personally today, I find new experiences, restaurants, activities through like social media, Instagram, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, Instagram, Yelp was just becoming,
Yelp was just coming up, so that
Yelp.
was the
Yeah,
that was the era we were in. Yeah,
right.
Marcus, what was it like at Groupon in 2012?
Yeah, so they pioneered what we call the daily deals. Like that's what it was called, daily deals.
Daily
And
deals.
so
Makes
and
sense.
so every day you could, go onto the website or the app at the time and find some experience, typically around food or adventure, something that you want to do with friends. And you get it at a discounted rate, like a highly discounted rate, like typically 50% or so. And what was interesting was that you ended up having people trying all kinds of different stuff as a sales rep of the company. Like it was a little weird because they gave their business model out to the world. Like they were just like, hey, this is how we make business. And then all you saw was like hundreds, if not thousands, of daily deal companies pop up all over the place. Like
It
it
was
was,
crazy.
it was so wild. So
Yes.
you'd have anything from like larger competitors to like the mom and pop shops that would just pop up and steal business from Groupon because they just gave their playbook out to the world, which was really a fascinating way to do business, I thought.
Yeah.
Overall, it was also more like the Wild Wild West back then, though. I mean, when you think of like your like the tech scene, it's like, foosball tables, the
Yeah.
whole nine, like in the office. And it almost kind of felt like we just kind of did whatever we wanted to, like like everyone, it's like, hey, we want to make money, go close some business, don't really have processes in place, just go kind of figure it out. And what was interesting to me is that you're working with some really intelligent folks. And so I remember my cohort of new hires, we were like, hey, so there's no processes in place. Like, nope, you'll figure it out. So we banded together to really iron out what we thought would be successful. I mean, and what I
Hmm.
mean by that is like we would get into rooms and whiteboard out like, the targets that we wanted to go after for customers, or for clients. We would sometimes meet at each other's condos and whiteboard and like just have like a working lunch session, things of that nature. But it was really cool because what came from that was that we were all pretty successful just by, collaborating with one another.
Sure.
Um, which was really cool to see overall. And everyone went on to do like really cool things, which is great. But back then, like Groupon in the tech scene in Chicago, like Groupon was the company that you wanted to work for.
Yeah.
And so being a part of it was really awesome. I remember it took me quite a while to actually get on board because they had been like trying to recruit me for quite some time. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm going to chill. I'm not really sold on this whole thing. And I remember my roommate was actually in HR. And he goes, dude, just come to the office and come hang out for a little bit and just check it out. I'll introduce you to some of the other
I
revenue.
gotcha.
And
He knew you just had to see that foosball table. He's like, if I can just get him to
oh,
see the foosball
Big
table,
booze
he's
guy.
in. Yeah,
he got me on the hook right away,
I'm
giving me all
sure.
kinds of snacks, gave me a beer. I was like, oh yeah, I'm live.
That's amazing.
That is.
And I wanna kind of go a little deeper though. So you mentioned that you and your kind of cohorts, you got together and said, let's build out some best practices and processes, right?
Mhm.
But you're in Chicago. You're not in Silicon Valley. That's one of the most interesting things I think about Groupon. Did you guys have like, you were kind of the only game in town, I would imagine. Did you have awareness of how, like a Yelp, was doing it in Silicon Valley? Like I try to take myself back to 2012. And I think a lot of what I learned about tech was just through TechCrunch. So I don't know, how much awareness did you guys have, or were you just run and gun, kind of just following your instincts?
We knew that we had something special in Chicago because like it was the buzz. Like if you worked at Groupon, people were like, "Oh, you work at Groupon. You have one of those fancy jobs." But overall, we didn't understand how much of an impact it was compared to Silicon Valley or anywhere else. We just knew that it was like a cool atmosphere, a cool environment. And so yeah, that was pretty much it. Like we were just like, okay, we know that we got something cool for where we're at. But it wasn't until I actually got to the Bay Area when everyone was like, "Oh, you worked at Groupon. That was really cool. How was it?" And asking me about my experiences. I'm like, "Oh, cool. I didn't know that you all thought of it that way." But yeah, I was at Groupon. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, totally. It's one of those, I would, put it in for that time period. It's like one of those, call it, 3 to 5
Yeah.
companies that kind of just experience that crazy rocket ship growth, hiring tons of people, wild stories, an eccentric founder. I see you're smiling, right? So
Yeah.
lots of interesting stuff.
Y-
Um,
Yeah,
Mike, you were gonna say
Marcus, I
something.
want to
Sorry.
ask. You mentioned like you got one of your unlocks was like collaborating with your cohort, like the
Mhm.
other folks on the sales team, right?
Yeah.
And figuring it out. That's interesting. I think that's a. I don't know. I'm curious how that happened. And you mentioned being in the, going to other people's apartments, whiteboarding sessions, because there's also like a. Was there like a thread of like competitiveness like between
Oh,
each other? Like
Yeah.
how did you manage that? How did this come to fruition? I'm curious.
yeah. So what you saw with with sales reps that had been at Groupon for quite some time, they were very competitive towards the new hires, like almost a little threatened, just from the standpoint of like, well, what makes you so special to be able to be here? But after they got through that initial like thought process, they were very inviting as far as like, hey, this is what we tried that has worked, etc. They would share their practices with us. But you get really close with the cohort that you come in with, like you pretty much, because you're going through like days and days of training with one another, and so we kept a really tight knit. And so what we ended up doing is just started talking about our frustrations around how are we supposed to get these deals. There wasn't really any process in place besides just like quote unquote tribal knowledge, if you will. So we would talk about our frustrations and share some best practices with one another. And then it just came to a point where one of the other reps was like, hey, why don't we just make this a standing thing? Like once a week, let's just get into, if we're in the office, we'll just go find a room and we'll whiteboard out what's going on. If we're not in the office, because we were outside reps at the time, it's like, well, why don't we just meet at someone's apartment, and we'll cater food or whatever, and then we'll just whiteboard it out there, and then we can go out and do our thing and then report back as to like what has worked or what's not working. And what you saw is that we started to find areas that were very beneficial for closing business. And the
Hmm.
the short, the short one was like restaurants. Everyone needs to eat. Everyone, and Chicago's a big food scene anyway. And so you're like, everyone wants to go try new restaurants, try new experiences. We found very early on that if we could get a hidden gem of a restaurant, then you could make your numbers pretty quickly.
Interesting. And I'm going to, so you keyed in on something that I've always been really interested in.
Mhm.
Uh, you have experience in both enterprise, but then also Groupon's effectively, I know they do some enterprise deals, but it's really SMB sales.
Mhm.
Um, Classic example. How the heck did you and your colleagues figure out when to call a restaurant, right? Because you need to get a hold of the decision maker.
Yeah.
Sometimes the decision maker is literally back working the fryer.
Yeah.
What would you
Yeah.
guys do?
So I remember doing some really cool creative things. It was like, when you think about a restaurant, you have to go eat, right? So if I'm out in the field, like going around looking for places, I would just go during lunch or maybe right after lunch and just see how busy the restaurant was. And
Interesting.
and then from there, like I would do it a couple times over, like over the course of like a week or two or whatever, but stop in just to see like, oh, is it busier this day? Is it busier that day? I would also read Yelp reviews, things of that nature, to help me out to understand like, hey, you're leaving money on the table and this is why. Like I've been in here and there's been no one in here but me. Like there's a way that we can actually draw more business to you. And once you're able to have those compelling conversations with owners, they're a little skeptical at first, like, yeah, we don't fully trust what you're saying. But then we're like, let's just try it out. Let's test it out and see if it works. And then from there, once you have them the one time, that's typically when you get repeat customers.
Consume the thing that you're selling. I mean, I understand that that's not always possible, but whenever you can, it's just you're never going to get more authenticity in your outreach, the way you solution for somebody, than when you're an actual consumer of whatever it is they're providing. So
I couldn't agree more. And what really comes out of it is just like different creative ways of thinking about the consumption, like, oh, like what if it's food, like I wish I would have told my friends we could have had a party here, or something along those lines. Or if it's a product, it's like, oh, I didn't even know that it did this thing. Like we could tell a whole different group of people about this product. So
Definitely.
yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and so maybe before we transition here, I did look up some notes on Groupon because I was like, what are they doing today? Like, what are they up to? So I just did a couple Google searches, and what's really interesting is like, so when you joined, Marcus, I think you were doing like $1 billion of revenue at Groupon, and today I think they've declined. So they're doing about 400 million, I think, in revenue, and I'm not sure if they've been cash flow positive, if they recorded a cash flow positive year. But what's really interesting is like they are going through a transformation. So if you want, and a lot of times you transform, you kind of take things from companies that, in tech that are doing things really well, you adopt some things from their model. What's really interesting about Groupon is their CEO just wrote like a letter to the shareholders explaining the strategy, which is like pretty cool. This doesn't happen all the time, but essentially there is a Groupon competitor in the Czech Republic that popped up. So to your point about earlier about all these competitors popping up and just adopting the model, well,
Wow.
it happened internationally, not just locally here in the United States. And the company is called Groupania, I believe, if I'm doing my read. So Groupania, and so essentially the company that set up Groupania had a lot of success in transforming the model because the model wasn't working there either. So they transformed it from being a daily deals company to truly a experience marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was cool to read that Groupon, the current CEO, is now they're trying to copy their copycat.
Mm-hmm.
And so the story's still kind of TBD. We'll see how the transformation goes, but it'd be really interesting if that's something that works for them. Is like, hey, we are copying a company that copied us to transform our model.
And just in hearing some of the early days stuff from Marcus, it sounds like you guys were kind of already I love that about sales. I think that sales people, they will find the angle. And it sounds like you were kind of right around there as you were, out there pitching to these small businesses. You were pitching, it sounds like, experiences. It's like, hey, I could throw a party here, or I should have 10 of my friends to come, do paddleboarding. And that was it versus like, a 10 pack of tanning bed sessions, right? It's probably more experiences because Groupon was bringing people together. That's what it kind of feels like.
Yeah, it was social.
And you guys probably knew that probably earlier than the executive team did.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that was the one thing that whenever we would have like our weekly meetings, we would talk more about that because it's like, hey, Chicago being a larger city and, transplants coming in all the time and trying to figure out what to do. It's like we're creating experiences and people are getting a chance to see different parts of the city or the overall Chicago land, if you will. So it was really cool.
That's super cool. Shifting gears here a little bit. You obviously aren't at Groupon anymore, right? You've done a few things. What made you leave the mothership? You were on a crazy, sort of rocket ship like path, and things were changing by the minute. But then, somewhere along the way, you found a new opportunity. So what was that, and what prompted you to actually make that leap?
Yeah, so I was always like on the road or always like gone when I was at Groupon, just for work or whatever. And I had a buddy of mine who we used to play basketball. He was a management consultant, and same thing. Like he would be gone he would fly out like on Mondays and get back on Thursdays. And so one day we were just sitting around talking, like, man, I don't even have time to do laundry. I don't even have time to like make my meals and things of that nature. And so I was like, man, it would be really cool. I remember exactly saying it'd be really cool if we could hire like a Geoffrey from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, like a butler, to get all of our stuff done. So that has like a little bit of sass, but like able to like, like do the things that we need. And we kind of kicked around the idea as a joke for, I want to say like a day. And then we were just like, why don't we come up with a business and make this a real thing? Like, it's time to do what we want to do. So let's just do this. And so sure enough, we did. We founded a company called My Butler. I quit Groupon. Well, I worked my butler and Groupon for a little bit of time just to see, like, iron out some of the things. And obviously, like, we were getting a lot of traction. I think that we were trying to get 10 customers by like the end of the year or something like that. And we got like 30 customers within a week. And I was like, okay, now we don't have the butler to do the thing. So I was, doing sales, being the butler, doing it all.
No way. That is awesome.
and
Yeah.
and then we ended up finding ways to make it more efficient and to scale a bit more, but did that for quite some time. And in Chicago, we were servicing Chicago and New York. And then I actually had a founder reach out to me, who through Lightbank, the VC, in the Bay Area, basically saying, I love your entrepreneur spirit. I love that you've done, sales in different capacities. Why don't you come learn from me how to be a CEO, number one, and how to and just how to like scale and refine your sales process. And his name was Pete Kazanji, and he brought me over to Talent Bin, which was a company that was an aggregate software to find software developers worldwide where they were online, where their footprints were online. So, you can think of GitHub and other areas like that. You make this aggregate profile, selling that data to all the companies out there that are looking for software engineers. So, yeah.
That is a wild story that I did not know. What was the craziest or the most interesting request that you would get as the butler? I got to know that.
Someone
That
asked
you can
me,
say.
yeah, fair.
I'm sure there's some very weird ones. We don't want to. This is episode 1. We don't want to get like canceled immediately. So give us give us the PG ones. Yeah.
Well, I'll give you two. One, once I realized that I couldn't be the butler anymore, we hired someone that was actually trained from the Netherlands to be the butler and lived in Chicago, and he helped us with
cool.
like refining our processes and like telling, like, there was so much information that we just did not know about butler and butler school.
Sure.
So that was interesting. So him being able to like cook a Thanksgiving dinner for a family and really giving them the full like butler experience was one of the cooler things that we saw. On a weirder note, when I was the quote unquote butler, someone asked me, they were a chef, and they asked me to organize all of their recipes, and they had thousands of recipes on like napkins and all kinds of stuff.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, how am I going to make money if I'm stuck here doing this? It took a long time, but I did get it done.
Yeah.
And that was the spark that was like, yeah, I can't be the butler anymore.
This is like TaskRabbit before TaskRabbit.
Yeah, this is totally TaskRabbit.
Oh wow,
so we ended up turning the model into just being a conduit. Like we would work with dry cleaning places and floral places, etc., and just being a conduit from that standpoint to make it more efficient for ourselves.
So you joined Pete at Talent Bin, leaving that experience of founding your own company. What do you feel like, what's one thing that worked and what's one thing that didn't work that you can remember from that?
From the company or from working with Pete?
From founding the company. We'll get into the Talent Bin piece.
One thing that worked was that when you are solving for a pain that people are experiencing, they will buy. If you and it was clear as day. Like I didn't think it was going to be as successful out the gate as it was, but obviously there were so many other people that were experiencing this pain that they were like, yes, we want to spend more time with our friends, family, loved ones, whatever. So that was one thing that I learned. And the other thing is that make sure that you're doing the right amount of research. Like these were just hunches that we had. So, I wasn't really formulating the best data sources to come up with this, but I think it helped me in the process of like, okay, I got to really dive deeper in the research to make sure that this is going to be successful. Thing that didn't work, I would say, is that that we tried too many things. Tried way too many things, and we're just a little bit ignorant as far as like what we were getting ourselves into. And so I think that we could have probably saved ourselves a lot of time and a lot of money if we just focused on like one specific offering as opposed to going so wide at first. Like I mentioned that story about that chef experience.
Yes.
I could have easily just said, no, we don't do that. And then it would have been okay, probably. But,
Right.
you know, I almost, I won't say I ruined the experience because like they were extremely happy with what I did. They were renewing, but it just took longer than I had anticipated because I just didn't know.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Focus, right?
Mhm.
Trying to be jack of all trades,
Yep.
master of none.
Yep.
That makes a lot of sense. And by the way, if I was a VC and you came into my office and I wouldn't even let you finish the pitch. You'd have me at Geoffrey from Fresh Prince. I would hand over a blank check and I would be like, I don't care if this is successful or not.
Yeah.
You need to take my
I'm
money.
already
Yeah.
thinking of the potential upsells. Like you
Yeah.
can click a switch over if you want the bad attitude that Jeffrey
Right.
has.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And Jeffrey had I would love to sit in on Jeffrey's performance reviews. He had a bad attitude, but was clearly great at his job. That is great. Yeah, and then so funny enough, I just was at a dinner with Pete, and brilliant guy. Would love to. You touched a little bit on what Talent Bin does, and sort of fast forward. You went from one rocket ship to effectively a little bit of a different company in the sense that it looked like Talent Bin actually went through kind of like a pivot. There was what they did initially, and then eventually selling. So yeah, tell us a little bit about your experience. You had kind of cut your teeth. Now you
Yeah.
had some sales experience, but you were really thrust into a whole different level of scaling. It feels like.
Yeah. So I would say that joining Talent Bin is really where I learned a lot of the processes that I use today, because we were making very informed decisions based off data. Like we were working with highly intelligent people, no matter if it's their first job out of college or they've been doing it for quite some time. But it was the first time that I felt like collaboration was very important, iterating was very important, and just being in an environment that you are going to be a continuous learner, while you're there. So when I got to Talent Ben, I'd had success at Groupon. I'd had success in previous roles, but not success like what I had when I got to Talent Ben. And the main reason was because now we're creating a repetitive, scalable model, and I'm seeing it time and time again, like how we're doing it on a daily basis. The importance of, I know it's maybe controversial, but the importance of like being in an office with one another, to learn like when you're on the phone and doing demos, etc. I was the first remote hire for Talent Ben in Chicago.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, when everyone else was in the Bay Area. And I was learning at a slower pace, a much slower pace than everybody else. And they like Pete did a great job of like keeping me involved and like trying to, get me out to the Bay Area once a month to like learn from the team. And eventually we both just agreed that like I should just move to the Bay, which was something that I always wanted to do anyway. So I moved to the Bay. And once I was in the office, I'd say the first 2 weeks that I was in the office, light bulb just clicked. Like everything became so much easier because I saw the pace in which the team had operated on. So we could be on the phone and like trying to do a demo or trying to close a deal, and Pete or any of the other AEs would write down, things for the objection that I was facing and just toss it to me on the notepad. Now I'm like, oh, we could actually do this, or we could actually things that I had no idea that was possible.
That's
Um,
really cool.
so from that standpoint, and then we're all challenging ourselves to be better. How, like, what books are we reading? How are we learning how to about revenue leadership? How are we learning about scaling? And Pete being very transparent and like what the business was doing was really awesome to see. Like I had never had that type of insight before. And so once we were able to do that, and I was able to see that, a whole lot of opportunities opened up internally and externally. So I remember I was doing sales for a while there, and then we were thinking about getting into a different market. I told them that I was interested in being a product manager, just I want to try something new. And the founders, Pete and Jason, were like, "Yeah, come learn with Jason on what you need to be doing in order to do that." And so I helped build out this whole different product. And yeah, it opened up a whole nother revenue stream for us. I just told them in my one-on-one that I wanted to try something new.
What
And
number hire were you? What number employee?
I think 13.
Okay, because I was going to say that sounds like a privilege that's given to those early employees. That's one of the things that I stress to anybody that will listen, quote unquote. A lot of younger people probably won't listen to me, but I'm always that was the previous company before Mike and I founded Hireframe. I joined a company called TaskUs as employee. Technically, I was employee. I don't know what, but when I got there, there was essentially a handful of people. But yeah, one incredible thing is that when you join something that early and you really do earn the trust of your colleagues and the founders, it was just amazing how, I guess, patient they were willing to just, sort of allow me to try different things until I found my fit. So you flirted with something else, but I
Yes.
feel like you ultimately came back though to your
Yeah.
forever home, which is like revenue, sales.
Yes.
Accurate.
Yeah. Very accurate. I think that what I learned was like Pete's like a product marketing person at heart, and so how he attacks sales is from that lens. And so what I learned from being in product management for that short bit of time was how to utilize that in the sales in the sales business function, like from a operation standpoint, from just making sure that everything is documented and communicated the right way so that people can, if I have a new hire, then they know exactly where to look for how to do their job. And so it was really interesting to see it from that standpoint. Yeah, I ended up coming back to sales because you make more money.
Yeah, the money is nice. The money is nice. The product manager title is really cool.
Yeah.
And it's probably refreshing to not be on so many calls,
Yeah.
but those commission checks are pretty awesome, pretty sweet.
Yes. Yep. It was my true calling.
So Talent Bin had I guess I'd be curious to hear in your own words if you feel like it was successful, but right, they didn't die out like some startups do. They were acquired by I believe Monster, and Monster now it looks like potentially I think Jobvite, which I don't know if I haven't kept up with the job post world,
Yeah.
right? But or the talent search world, but yeah, you went through. It looks like you joined in 2013, if I'm not mistaken, and then I think the acquisition happened in 2014.
Mhm.
So, what was that experience like? You had come
Yeah.
from
So
Groupon, and now you're at a company that gets bought, and it looks like you did a bunch of work with the parent company. So, walk us through that experience.
it was probably one of the coolest experiences that I could have asked for, or that it could have just, I guess, happened to me. Because I had no clue what that world was like. And so we get acquired, I believe it was 2014. And basically Pete and Jason, the founders, had this theory that we were going to be like, he was molding us into being like revenue leaders, if you will, and like that we could hang with any revenue leader in any organization and all of these and yeah, all of that. So we have the acquisition from to Monster. We Monster.com. We are then like responsible for larger books of business and larger reps, or a larger amount of reps to get to our number. And so we're having to give like executive briefings. We're having to document and illustrate how we're trying to double, quadruple our sales by using the workforce that Monster.com had in place. And
Wow.
so it was really it was a trying but awesome experience, because you have to pretty much convince people who don't know who you are that they need to sell this product, and they have a quota of how much of this product that they need to sell. And it was there was a lot to it, but overall I think it made every single one of us better, because now we're having these very high level conversations with the executive team and what they need to be doing. And then we're going down to the rep level and saying, hey, just get us involved with any of those deals, and we can help you close it. We'll train you on how to close it. We made the whole organization go through talent bin training where they had to be certified in order to sell the product, and that was based off of like seeing that there were so many people in the organization that in order to speak of the product the right way, you had to get the checkbox of yes, I've been certified.
Yeah, that's a wild, but I'm sure an incredible experience for your career. And it feels very timely because I think there's a ton. I don't know if Mike, this is what you were going to jump into, but there's a ton of M&A activity going on, and I think that's only going to continue, right, in tech, because we're in some wild, and we're in for some wild times, frankly, to come. Uh, if you were to kind of distill down going through that experience as the company that got acquired and being sort of, as you mentioned, you were positioned as a revenue leader, but now you're working with, a lot of reps. I saw on your LinkedIn, it's like 175 monster sales reps. They've been doing things one way. Now you've got something else for them to push. And they're probably like, who's this guy?
Right.
What worked? What didn't work in that whole kind of time?
It let me know that like larger corporations, I don't know if I'm cut out for it as much, just because
Sure.
a lot of red tape. And just to get anything done, it's almost like a political game. You have to play it, so I would have to go in person a lot and just, make sure that, I was getting FaceTime with individuals, let them know that I'm not just some person on the other screen, just like telling them that they need to do things a certain way, but just understanding like how selling talent bin could benefit them, like personally, financially, things of that nature. And honestly, it was once you're able to connect with people on a human level from that standpoint, it became so much easier. Like I had a trusted team of reps that I knew that were going to sell a certain amount of the product, month over month, and we would have check-in periods, etc. They would always get highlighted as far as like what they were doing. It was interesting to say the least, but I love the experience. And then being able to see like how revenue leadership, like in a startup, how as an account executive or an SDR, you pretty much are being groomed for revenue leadership compared to some of these, larger, more established companies that have been around for a while that are told what to do and not able to like really think outside the box.
You had a question, Marcus, but you kind of just answered it. Is this is the biggest company you've ever worked at now, and it's you went from working with startups to now you're in this enterprise, and it sounds like you figured out a approach to selling internally. So you're talking about building relationships and finding advocates within the organization and what it takes. I imagine you just happen to swing by people's offices all the time. So I'm curious, like, what were those other things that you did to navigate a large organization, or also just like you're still early-ish in your career, you just assumed a team of 200 people essentially. That's a big leap. What were some of the things that you did to accelerate your learn how to work in corporate? Did you have any mentors that you kind of like learned from or who coached you through this process?
I would say that Pete was pretty much like our mentor. But what I would do is I would give a write up every week of like the wins and learns with it to the Monster organization, like to like who I was kind of like responsible for, of like things that I did that didn't work, things that I did that went very well, highlighting people that had unique questions and like just were scared to like sell the product because they thought that maybe they'd fail. So I would give the organization a lot of transparency as far as like, hey, like these are questions that are being had. Keep them coming. Like I'm more than happy to answer them for you. More than happy to set up a webinar so that I can show you all how to use the product, etc. More than happy to tell you about my shortcomings and what I've done to overcome them. And once I kind of gave that element, then everyone's like, oh, okay, so Marcus is a real person and not just some person like in the background trying to tell me what to do. And then from there, just meeting them where they were at. So if they had a client that was, say, down in Texas, and they didn't know for sure if they could pitch Talent Bin or whatever, then I would just go down there and I would help them sell the product that they really wanted to sell, but then also talk a little bit more just from an educational standpoint of how Talent Bin could help could help them out as well. So they were like, oh, you're not just pushing this product that you're responsible for. You're actually trying to get us to, get the sale or get the deal. And then if it happens that we get talent, then great. If not, no big deal. We tried.
Yeah, that weekly, some of those tactics I think are so valuable. The weekly email one is something that Mike and we actually talk a lot about doing that. Mike, I'm just making a mental note. I think
we've been talking about it. We haven't done it yet, though.
We haven't done it yet.
Meaning to do this with our team internally. And because I think that transparency, essentially you mentioned you were meeting people where they're at and you were letting people know where you're at with things.
Yes.
And that's extremely powerful.
And I think it's just this basic thing where you get stuck in kind of like a silo where you just assume that these conversations you're having with individuals, that everybody's thinking this way or everybody knows this. And so distributing that information and really selling internally, that's really, really cool that you went through that. Sorry, you were going to say something, Marcus.
Yeah. So then the other piece of it is like, I didn't mention the all hands aspect. Like I love having all hands. Early on in our organization, I try to have it at least twice a month. And then you can scale back, later on, but twice a month. And it's really, where the business is, where we're at to our goals, where we are falling short, what assistance we need from everyone from engineering to product to whoever else, marketing, etc. But and then allowing others to like have the floor to speak about what they've experienced. That all hands aspect is very important to me. Because they're getting a layer of like vulnerability from their executive team. So like, oh, okay, like we understand, we're going to rally behind and we're going to help. But two, they're thinking of ways in which they can help the business out. It's also a security aspect. Like they feel like, okay, my job necessarily isn't in jeopardy. Because oftentimes that is what a lot of people think is like,
yes,
how are we doing as a company? Am I going to lose my job? Should I start interviewing? It's like, no, we're good. We got money in the bank. We're fine.
Yeah, and you just touched on it a bit, but this is a subject that Mike and I are obsessed with. Yeah. Talent bin sounds like there's a talent bin mafia, just like there's a PayPal mafia. So I know I just had a dinner with Pete, and he's building, Atrium and seems to be doing some really incredible things. But you mentioned there's a bunch of other folks in the same book, included with you. You brought someone from Talent Bin with you to Textio. What's this? I'm convinced there's a lot more of these mafias that are out there, and the sales ones are a little bit harder to peg. I think that PayPal is obviously the most talked about, and some other ones. But what are the folks from Talent Bin? The Talent Bin mafia. Yeah. Where have they gone off to? What have they gone off to do?
So the Talent Bin mafia is real. We all stay in contact quite often. Everyone. So when we were at Talent Bin, Pete was working on this thing called Modern Sales Pros, where it was getting revenue leaders in a room as a think tank and just talking about certain topics, like what they were dealing with on a daily basis, things like that. And it was like getting you great minds into a room, similar skill set, and seeing how we solve these type of problems. Mind you, the Talent Bin folks were all account executives, but he had a theory that we could hang with any of the revenue leaders when we joined this Modern Sales Pro thing. So of course we all joined the first one. We're on around these roundtable discussions and giving our 2 cents and things of that nature. And it really helped us from a confidence standpoint understand that we were on the right path. Now Modern Sales Pros is blown up. It's doing amazing things. Yeah. Tens of thousands of revenue leaders worldwide, which is great. But what was interesting there is that group of AEs and SDRs have all gone on to be revenue leaders, they have their own companies. We keep in constant contact. Whenever I go down the Bay, I try to have coffee or have dinner with one of them. And we're all over the country now. Like we all were in the Bay. Some are in Miami. I'm in Seattle. Some are in LA. We've all spread out now. But we're on a group text whenever something happens to one of us. Like when my actual SDR Pukar owns a company called Security Pal, which is a really cool company. When he raised funding, then we all just congratulated him and said like how amazing that was.
Amazing.
I mentioned Akio, who is also one of the managing partners for my consultancy, Culture Perspective. He
Great.
is enterprise sales like guru. Like he can close large deals, and he's just very good at understanding the nuances of that. So all of us being able to have this like open discussion around things that we're facing has just been really cool.
Yeah, Mike and I are both smiling and nodding here. I Another mental note for us, Mike, is I really want to figure out what the recipe is for a good mafia, because I think that you touched on a bunch of it. It's like you need someone to be great at, it sounds like Talenpin, and specifically Pete, was really great at sourcing talent, right? So he proactively reached out to you, and I'm sure he did the same thing for others. You mentioned that he was really encouraging and supportive, in you guys basically saying like, hey, you're going to be a revenue leader. That's the way that I want you to think. You might be an SDR, you might be an AE, but I want you to think like this. Obviously, you had the benefit of the experience of being at a fast growing company and going through an acquisition and all that sort of stuff. But
Yeah,
I
I
do
think
think there's this like recipe,
there's
and
a
it sounds like
recipe.
you
I
guys
think
got it.
just thinking about and listening to Marcus's story a little bit, it starts with like there's a leader, right? There's like there's like a godfather.
Mhm.
There's a godfather that comes with a certain set of beliefs and values.
Yeah.
And I think what they don't just espouse those values and beliefs on their employees, on their team. I think they actually, in the recruiting process, they're looking for people that fit those values. And I think
Yes.
a lot about like Miami Heat culture.
Mhm.
So I'm a
Mhm.
big Miami Heat fan from South Florida. But like Pat Riley would be like Pete, right? He set up a culture. He's like, this is what we're about. And we're unwavering these values. This is what we're about. And then everyone that comes up through their program, their goal is to do something better and something bigger. So it's always like the North Star. But then everyone goes off and does their own things, right? Whether it's like Eric Spoelstra coming up from being like the video guy, but many coaches have gone on to lead other G League teams or other teams in different capacities, and the players are all the same. So I imagine you and your cohort there, Marcus, you guys share a lot of probably the same values when it comes to sales or business or scaling.
Yes.
So there is a recipe. It's something to think more deeply about, I think.
Yeah.
Would you consider yourself more of a LeBron James, D Wade, whoever? A Birdman? Wasn't Birdman there?
Yeah. What? I guess. Yeah. What? Marcus, did you play basketball? You mentioned you played sports. Were you a basketball player?
Yeah, basketball. I coach basketball as well, and I
Oh,
also
amazing.
country and track as
Okay. At what levels do you coach?
well. Coached middle school girls AAU.
Very cool.
Mostly girls. I've coached high school as well. But yeah, mostly middle school.
Yeah, that's not an easy job.
No,
It is
live to tell a tale.
it is definitely a rewarding experience, but it's also a very trying experience.
I bet. Exercise and patience.
Yes. Yes.
That's really, really cool.
I would say it's probably the Ray Allen of the group.
Okay.
You're
There
the
you
Ray
go.
Allen. Okay.
Yeah. Got that range. I love it. Very cool. And then, so at Textio, you sort of, tried some stuff out, and then ultimately you took a very, kind of like, I would say your most formative leadership role, it looks like, within the revenue organization. So what was that experience like?
Yeah, so the Textio experience was a really interesting and cool one where, you were giving, like, you kind of building off of the talent bin experience of like collaboration and just trying things out and seeing what's going to work. Like, you have a hypothesis, A/B test it, let's see what's going to work. We were very fast paced in how we moved. And ultimately we, took the company from like, zero to tens of millions, right? Like in a pretty short time frame, I'd say. And being able to, when you're having that type of success, being able to like scale a team a certain way and really understand like why customers are purchasing, what's the pain that they're facing, and then you have like a founding team that's bought in this process. We moved at such a rapid rate, like it was unbelievable how we were able to take something, fail quickly, turn it around, get it right back out there, and it be a success was just awesome. And yeah, so I had really fostered a community of like like what I thought was like the next revenue leaders, if you will. And I wanted to give people an opportunity to like flex those muscles, like I was given that opportunity. And I had toyed with the idea of me starting my own thing and kind of like branching out on my own and just helping uh, a lot more companies than just one with the go-to-market strategy. And so during that process, I was very open and honest with the executive team as far as like what I was thinking about doing and that I was looking to leave at some point. Obviously, not right away. Like I wanted to make sure that we had a predecessor in place, that that the team felt comfortable, all of that type of stuff. But overall, we were just it was time for me to like try something new because I'd been there for 5 years and I wanted to, and I'd been hit up by a lot of organizations to come and lead their teams. And I said, well, let me try this out on my own first. And then if that doesn't work, then obviously I can go do that. But what ended up happening is that started during the pandemic, which is just an interesting time to start a business, right?
We can second that.
Yeah. And it was interesting because I had a lot of early learns, a lot of early wins and a lot of early learns. And it shaped how I kind of position the company today, which is we're looking for organizations that are looking to build a sound culture from the start, from the revenue organization, leading with empathy, but also transparency and collaboration. And with all of those things, the revenue piece will come. And oftentimes, what we see with sales is that it's typically one of the more toxic environments historically, and so
Yes.
we're trying to like change that notion, change that mindset a bit.
How do you just key in on, I think, something that's very top of mind for me, and I'm sure many other founders. What is the most common thing when you meet with a founder in terms of like what they think they need to invest in? And you just kind of, I believe, hinted at it, where it's you mentioned building like a really positive, non-toxic environment, foundational pieces. Yeah, what are those common things that don't work for these folks, and what really does work,
Yeah.
in your opinion?
So there's this. So from an AE perspective, I feel like founders oftentimes say, in order for us to hit our numbers, we need to hire a ton of AEs or a ton of sales reps. And I oftentimes try to combat that as much as possible because you don't know what you don't know. Do you have product market fit? Do you like, there's so many things that go into that process in order to really make a sound decision like that. Like, or they say that we need a revenue leader in order to do these things. And I kind of counter that and say you might just need a founding sales member, like a founding AE that can document things and isn't afraid to try and A/B test things along the way, and that can get you very, very far. One solid AE and one solid SDR, if that's the model, can get you so far before you actually have to hire a revenue leader. And the proof is like with Textio, that's what we did. Like we had two AEs and an SDR, and we really had a lot of great success from that standpoint. I'm not to say
Yeah,
it works all the time. It just works. Like that is a model that I try to follow. Is like, why do you think that you need this? Did the board tell you that you need these people in place? Have you done the math to actually understand that it's going to be costly, to hire all these people? That's one piece. And then the other is that, there's this, when it comes to the sales culture historically, it is one of those things where people think that they need to act a certain way in order to get things done. And it comes off as, just it kind of comes off as like being a jerk. And I'm like, you don't necessarily have to be. Like if you actually just listen to people, you can have a competitive mindset. Like I love competition, internal, external competition. I love that. But it should
sure.
also come from a place of how do I lift up the rest of the team? Am I sharing knowledge with the team of what I've tried and what has worked and what hasn't, versus like I'm the best, I'm always going to be the best, I don't care about what you all do. While sure you will probably find success in that, wouldn't it be so much better if everyone had success though? Because then the company's evaluation goes up, ultimately you'll probably make more money, things of that nature. So
You mentioned you like to lead with like a cultural assessment, like seeing what the cultures are. I'm curious from from a sales org standpoint, what are do you have like in your head like different like archetypes of the sales cultures that you've seen?
Yeah.
What
yeah.
what are those?
Yeah, so it depends on the stage of the company. Depends on how many people are in the sales org. But if it's founder-led sales, oftentimes it's like not oftentimes it's been like do it my way because I've had success as the founder, and so this is the only way that you can do it. Versus when you're with if there's been a team there in place, they maybe haven't been given the right type of metrics to care about, and so they're just like they're throwing a lot of things. They have a lot of opportunities, but they're not closing necessarily anything because they haven't dissected what the problem actually is. So those are typically the two that I see the most often. And then it's just like the other one is just like the one that feels threatened by everybody else and is just like I'm just going to do things my way and like I don't care what
Mm.
you say and that's just going to be it. I'm not going to put stuff into our CRM. I'm a rock star. Just let me
The
be.
lone wolf.
Yeah, the
Lone
lone.
wolf.
Yeah.
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 Rogue.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and you mentioned this, and I think this is a very common one that I hear about a lot right now. But I call it like the old, and there's a better term for this, but it's like the sales cocktail napkin math.
Mhm.
The founder gets back from the board meeting, and they've done this cocktail napkin math. We need to get 10 million of ARR, so 1 million per rep. Bada bing,
Yeah.
bada boom. Hey, Marcus, go out and hire 10 people, get them all ramped, get them doing that. And the thing that I think I would love to hear your thoughts on, but I feel like goes oftentimes missed is just the incredible drain and energy drain it is to ramp one of those teams, have it not be successful, and then have to ramp it down when, like you said, you can accomplish so much more by just pouring your resources into. Would you say that like initial AE needs to be kind of like an entrepreneur where
Mhm.
they need to be able to really kind of think outside the box, try to help with finding product market fit. Like I just feel like that's the path. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
100%. Like I've seen AEs have so much success just by trying, by doing, by learning, by documenting, and by reaching bandwidth constraints. Once an AE reaches bandwidth constraints, then that can be the trigger of when you need to hire someone else or offload some of the workload, things of that nature. But you're talking about people that have a high capacity for things. And so if they're not in that 90% of their capacity being like from the bandwidth standpoint, then it doesn't make sense to keep hiring. Like it just
Right.
doesn't, unless they're just not the right person for the organization, and that's a different conversation. But
Totally.
ultimately, I want like if I'm looking at a team and we're going to start with an AE, I want them to one exceed their goals. I want them to be like overly full with opportunities every day, meetings and things of that nature every day, to the point that they're like, I don't have enough time to get to everything else that I need to get to. Great. Let me see if I can alleviate some of that. And whether that's another hire or consultancy or whatever else, something to offset that.
Totally.
Yeah,
Marcus, this
absolutely.
this founding or like first account executive hire seems like a critical hire for
Yeah.
a company that's growing quickly. W- what should a founder, I guess the founding team would be hiring this person,
Mhm.
assuming what should they look for in this hire, this first AE? What type of experience, what kind of qualities, um, industry experience, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Is there a list of criteria that you go by?
put your
Yeah,
Pat Riley hat on.
there
You're
we
you're
go.
you're scouting, who's available, free agents, that type of thing. Who's going to be your tent pole,
Mhm.
all-star. It's going to set the tone for the team.
I'm looking for individuals that have been on a founding team before, because they understand what it's like and they can work with ambiguity. They can work in so many different types of ways that if you haven't been in that environment before, it can be very taxing on you from an emotional standpoint and a mental standpoint. So I'm looking for someone that has at least done it before, whether they were an SDR or an AE or whatever, doesn't matter. But they've at least been a founding sales member before, because they're like, okay, they can go back to that time and say, I remember when it was like this, and it will get better. I just need to document or put the right things in place. if you have someone who's come from like a larger organization and where the processes already been defined, they don't. It's more oftentimes, like I won't say like everyone, but more oftentimes that like they don't know how to build it from scratch because they haven't done it before.
Super
Exactly.
smart.
Yeah.
You've been so giving of your time, Marcus. We love talking to you, and we would talk to you for hours and hours, but we also don't want to keep you from, I'm sure, the millions of things you got to do for your customers. You're coaching basketball, you're doing everything. We like to close what worked with two things from all of our guests. So the first one is we'd love for you to kind of play like a little bit of a hypothetical. You're talking to a young Marcus who is, early on in his career, starting to kind of figure out, who do I want to work for? What do I want to do? Knowing what you know now, what wisdom would you instill on them, and sort of what advice would you give to someone who might want to have a similar career to yours, similar accomplishments? What would you say?
Yeah, so it depends on if they are like the type of person that they are, but if they are like a high risk, high reward person, which is what I consider myself, then I would say go the startup route as early as possible. Go where you can be an early founding member, if you will, and you can learn from individuals within the organization. So if I'm an SDR, a first SDR, I'm looking to learn from the AE, from the CTO, the CEO, the finance person. Like I'm getting more insights into the overall business, especially if I have aspirations to be an entrepreneur myself. And also have one-on-ones with all of those people. It's not going to be regular one-on-ones like once a week type deal, but you should have at least once a month one-on-ones with every single person from that team early on, just to understand, what they're doing, why they're making why they're making these decisions, and then also have a mentor. Ask people to mentor you. Right. It's one thing that I did not do formally. I didn't ask for mentorship. I kind of stumbled into some of it. But when you ask for mentorship, it's a two-way street. It is you are being mentored, and you are also going to give information back as to the mentor as far as like what you've tried, the advice that you tried that they gave you, and how it's working out for you. So because every mentor wants to know, how is the advice? Do I need to tweak it? Things of that
Right.
nature. So, yeah.
Yeah, the whole mentor thing, I think that is a conversation that most people really don't even know how to start to have, where you ask someone to be your mentor. How do you find a mentor? All that sort of stuff. I think you've done that exceptionally well throughout your career. Something else that I've really appreciated about you is the way that I think you've been able to work in both your career aspirations, along with you're involved in a lot of projects, initiatives that have to do with, clearly I have to imagine these are things that are important to you personally. So when I think of that, I think of like equal opportunity schools and also your own business, Culture Perspective. So I mean, how do you do that? I feel like nowadays I have a hard enough time. I have a little one too, and I have just a hard enough time showering each day and trying to build this business and just keep my daughter from not being evil Knievel and just like leaping off of every tall surface. How do you do it? How do you weave all this stuff together?
Yeah, so I will say that it is an art and a science mixed in, but
Yeah.
these are, like you mentioned, these are passions of mine. Like I'm very passionate about some of the initiatives when it comes to underrepresented talent and how there's access to how they can get access to things. And so it's being very intentional with how I spend my time daily. And so oftentimes I'll have blocks of time on my calendar for each of the initiatives I'm a part of, and it's like making sure that I am giving it the right amount of attention to see the change that I want to see. When it comes to like the mentorship aspect, I have the Sales for the Culture, which is around almost 4,000 Black sellers globally now, anywhere
Wow.
from entry level to CRO status, and I can't do it all, but I have tapped other people in the organization to be mentors and to give guidance and to set up time with individuals to help out. I tried to do it all and I burnt out very quickly.
Yeah, of course. Naturally. Yeah, you gotta delegate, you gotta let other folks jump in. And it's gonna be so cool. All of these different sort of projects and initiatives and everything, organizations that you're a part of, it's going to be really cool. Similar to the folks at Talent Bin, to see where everybody ends up. You're going to have some really, really cool experiences from that.
Yeah, Marcus, just wrapping up here. Where can people find you?
Yes.
You're on LinkedIn. You have I have to say, one of the most phenomenal LinkedIn profile pictures I've ever seen.
Your website. You're a good looking person. So how do you?
Where can people find you?
I appreciate that. So on LinkedIn, I'm Marcus Knight. I believe my URL is Marcus Knight CRO or something along those lines, where you'll be able to find me on LinkedIn. My email is marcus@culturedperspective.com. And I pretty much respond within a day if people want to reach me there. And yeah, like I'm trying to join, more of these kind of podcasts, being able just to talk about all the things that are happening in the economy in the world right now. So if anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to, reach out and offer some advice if I have something to give.